And here's the blood supply to the kidney. Again, you have the renal arteries going to kidneys and branching into segmental arteries, interlobar arteries, and branching and branching and branching and branching. So what happens is you're distributing all the blood from the renal artery to these different areas all throughout the kidney. Right, and then once you notice is like, okay, these arteries are going into between the lobes of the kidney and branching off into the cortex of the kidney. And now once you reach the cortex of the kidney, they reach these things like that at this view right here. They look like cherry tomatoes. They're not smooth and round and glob like a perfect sphere like it looks in here. But if you look at them, they just at this level, they kind of look like that. So these little structures are called glomeruli, and so what you have here are nephrons, and it's only showing two nephrons in this picture for simplicity's sake, but all these glomeruli will have one nephron attached to that. So the nephron is what actually makes urine from blood. And in terms of locations and general structures of nephrons, there are two broad categories. So remember, like, where's the renal cortex and where's the renal medulla? And the cortex, again, is always the outer region of an organ or tissue, and then the medulla would be the inner portion. So the nephrons you find in the cortex, notice that this nephron is mostly located in the cortex, whereas this nephron is it's in the cortex, but it's right next to the medulla, and its loop is going all the way into the medulla. So to rewind a bit, these nephrons right here that are located mostly in the cortex, these are called cortical nephrons. And the ones that are right next at the border between the cortex and the medulla are called juxtamedullary nephrons. Whenever you see that prefix juxta, that means next to, and so that's what's happening here. These nephrons are right next to the medulla. They're in the cortex, but they extend more into the medulla compared to cortical nephrons. And so whenever you see any my videos or any other or textbooks or other videos talking about the nephron, what they typically do is take a nephron. Well, the nephron is a tube, but what they do is kind of like stretch out that tube to make it easier to teach and learn from. So nephrons are more like this picture you see from the Martini book. So nephrons aren't just like a linear tube with a little windy stuff. So they are a tube, but they're not like stretched out over a large horizontal spans. They're actually coil up upon itself. So this is what's happening here. You have the nephron from the glomerulus, and then it does all this winding and it loops around. It comes back on itself. So again, it's not completely untangled. The nephron is pretty tangled. And so here's an untangled view of this. So again, this is not how nephrons actually are arranged, but it's just showing you like to make it easier to visualize and know the different parts of a nephron. So the nephron is what leads from the glomerulus. A glomerulus is like a little ball or tuft of capillaries, and then the nephron leads from that, and they all lead to a collecting duct, which leads to a papillary duct. Now, the nephron itself is the part that actually forms the urine. So this is what happens here. So again, it's a tube, but in that other picture, the tube actually coils back upon itself. And then there's a substructure in the nephron called the renal corpuscle. And then from the renal corpuscle, then you have the tube itself, that really, very long and windy tube. That's the renal tubule. Now from the renal tubule, you lead to the collecting system, and this is what we see here. So the collecting system, the part that immediately receives fluid from the nephron is called the collecting duct. And when it starts to go toward the papilla of the kidneys, it ends up in the papillary duct, and this is where urine comes out and is excreted into the calyces of the kidney. So it goes to a structure called a minor calyx. We're not totally at the ureters yet, but this is where it ends up. Again, it goes from the corpuscle, and then to the tubule, then to the collecting system, and this is where you start to excrete the urine. Now the thing about this collecting system, you might be wondering what these other branches are here as well. Well, is it just like random tubes going somewhere else in the kidney? Actually, in a collecting system, what you have are typically maybe 6, give or so a few nephrons that are connected to the same collecting system. So a collecting system is kind of like a common sewer line or a common pipe shared between apartments. So all the nephrons might be different little apartments or floors, and then this collecting system is collecting all that urine that's forming from the nephrons into one system. So it's not just one nephron, one collecting system, even though you might see in some figures. They're just making it simple to look at by showing how fluid flows from the glomerulus to the nephron to the collecting system. So you can have multiple nephrons linked to the same collecting system. And here's the open stacks version. Again, it's showing you the blood flow and then this glomerulus. And again, we have our nephron over here, and then the collecting system that would connect to this nephron. And you can have multiple nephrons linked to the same collecting system. And for simplicity's sake, I didn't show all of them, but again, this is what I'm getting at here. So one nephron is not just one-to-one.